what is in store for the Flames the rest of the season as we talk Dustin Wolf and a little Olympic hockey as well. Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of Hot Topics. This episode brought to you by ProStars Plumbing and Heating, Calgary's first choice when it comes to plumbing and heating. Rob Wong joined alongside by Postmedia Calgary Flames writers Wes Gilbertson and Danny Austin. And guys, all the excitement right now revolves around the Four Nations face-off, which we'll touch on somewhat in a moment here, but the players not participating back at practice arenas around the NHL, getting prepared for the return to action. And for the Flames West, they'll be back at it on Sunday against the Sharks. 27 games remaining on the schedule. Calgary 3 points out of a wildcard spot at the moment. What is your biggest storyline heading into the unofficial second half?
Well, the biggest storyline for the Flames going into the final stretch of the season is obviously the wild card chase. Can they catch up to the Vancouver Canucks, currently 3 points back? What will it ultimately mean to their draft stock and all those things? But I'll give you a couple other storylines that go into that I'll be kind of keeping close tabs on. One is sort of the impact of the return of Connor Zary and Kevin Ball. We saw both on the ice for their first practice back. Both have been out due to injuries. Zary is one of the offensive drivers on this Flames team. Certainly a group that's 30th in the NHL in scoring can use a boost there. And I think a lot of people are already fascinated to see where he might fit in a retooled lineup that now includes Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. Kevin Ball's a top-pairing defenseman, and they've certainly missed him. And then coming up right away, I think one of the things I'm fascinated by is just how this upcoming 6-game road trip goes. The Flames have one of the toughest trips you could dream up coming out of their break. They open at home against the San Jose Sharks, but then they go to, and I might not get the order on this right, but they go to Washington, Tampa, Florida, Carolina, Philadelphia, and Dallas. There's 4 or 5 legitimate Stanley Cup contenders on that list. And so we could be talking about a team that either bolsters its wild card chase by showing that they can compete with those big guns, or a team that's potentially looking to sell off some pieces going into the deadline day because things have gone so poorly on that road trip. And so I think that's a storyline that will really be top of mind coming out of this pause.
I mean, the big story of this morning is how grateful I am that Wes listed off the opponents on this road trip. But he didn't
I think I got them right. I think I got them right.
I think you did. I wasn't trying that one. Look, I think Wes is right. I think that this season has, in a lot of ways, I mean, it started with being a year when nobody expected the Flames to make the playoffs, and now it's sort of at the point where narrowly missing would feel really disappointing. Prior to right before the break, it felt like every time that the Flames had a blip, the Canucks also had a blip. Right now, they are 3 points back, and it feels like the season may have flipped a little bit, but every team has its down stretches during a season, and I think that there is reason to believe that the Flames can keep pace, in part just because they have already through this many games. But, I mean, the reality is that the Flames made a decision not to sell their veteran players and get younger. And they didn't do that to finish 9th in the West. They did that to get playoff games, to, obviously get the revenue, but to bring some energy to the city and to make it worthwhile for those veterans to be here. So I actually think that at this point, it's a little bit imperative that they make the playoffs to prove that they were right in doing that. Now, the LA Kings aren't that far ahead either. So, it's sort of a 3-team race. But for me, everything is through the lens of making the playoffs. I know there are fans who want a full rebuild. I'm on record both here and elsewhere saying that, that's a conversation for 6 months ago, and probably this summer, as far as the season goes, it's all eyes on the playoff race, as it should be. And just as an added note, which I wasn't intending on saying, but that's really good for guys like Matt Coronato, like Connor Zary. I think playing meaningful minutes and meaningful games at this point in their career is great for their development and will make them better players. So it's not just about getting a couple home games. It's about looking out for those guys long term.
And if I can just jump in, one of the things that we're going to talk lots about in Calgary is it's not all good in Vancouver, right? Like, are the Canucks a better team on paper? Yeah, they finally solved the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson rift, but Quinn Hughes has been injured. Thatcher Demko's injured again. Elias Pettersson, the spotlight is as bright as ever because he hasn't had that offensive burst that people were expecting once JT Miller was out of the locker room. And so, part of the storyline here in Calgary is the drama that continues to unfold in Vancouver, and whether that's a team, despite the fact not many would have put them on level footing at the beginning of the season, I don't think Flames fans look at the Canucks 3 points ahead and say, oh, we can't catch them like that. It's a little bit of a mess over there. And I think that adds some optimism in this city.
Yeah, absolutely. It would. Looking at the situation going on right now with the Canucks. Meanwhile, Dustin Wolf, going to be a big story, has been a big story this season. Danny, right in the mix for a Calder Trophy. You recently wrote about him, speaking to coaches that helped him along the way. What did you learn about him that maybe you didn't know before?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea behind that story was honestly one of the things that we kept hearing from Ryan Huska is that when Dustin Wolf had a bad game, by his standards, obviously, the Flames had full confidence that he was going to bounce back. It was almost like his best games came after his worst games. And I wanted to know when that started. It was something Wes and I were like, that they say it as if it's normal, but that's a sort of unnatural thing. He's just unshakable. So, wanted to talk to one or two coaches about that. And when I did, the story sort of evolved. And I will say that the one thing that stuck out again and again is I kept asking these coaches, at what point did you realize that Dustin Wolf might have been special? And none of them could really answer. And the reason, and this is probably true of every athlete, is they were like, look, Dustin Wolf is unnaturally fast. He was supernaturally dedicated, but they were like, he also just worked. And it was the one thing that went back. And it's why I think, the concerns about how a goalie his size would translate to the NHL, they were never worried because they said he was going to work through it. He was going to work to fix those things in his game, move further back in the crease, constantly be devoted to his own development and his own growth as a goalie. And then you go back and look, and it's like, okay, best goalie in the AHL, best goalie in the WHL, heavily recruited by the U.S. national development team as a sort of 14 and 15-year-old because he was arguably the best goalie in the country in his age group at that point. And when you talk to coaches, and as I said, this is probably true of every athlete, the thing you hear again and again is that these young athletes were just willing to work harder, and that there probably wasn't anything different at 6 years old beyond a love of hockey, but it was about sort of a willingness to put in the work from the start.
Yeah, that's what we talk about when it comes to you, Danny. Always putting in the work. So
I do my best, man. I do my best.
I'm pretty sure all those library books in your background are overdue. By the way,
I have to read them. I have to take them out every Tuesday night. It's tough.
Lastly, as I mentioned, the Four Nations Face-Off is not yet concluded as of this recording, but Wes, I think everyone already looking ahead to the next opportunity for best on best hockey at the 2026 Olympics. You mentioned recently 6 Flames who could represent their country. I'm not going to ask you to name all 6 of them. People can go check it out, of course, but maybe give us 1 or 2 that you're really circling as, players that could have a big impact next year.
Yeah, and I don't even mind running through a few more. I'll just go quick. Martin Pospisil is a shoe-in for Slovakia. He was a big part of their qualifying quest this past summer. Sam Honzek, who made the Flames out of training camp and is actually, while he's spent most of this season with the Wranglers, is one of only 4 Slovak forwards to play in the NHL this season. He would be on that list, I think, as well. Rasmus Andersson just finished representing Sweden at the Four Nations Face-Off. His candidacy, I think, will be worth keeping eyes on. He was the 7th defenseman for the Swedes at this event, which kind of makes him the most likely candidate to be bumped out if someone has a surge, but does a lot of things that maybe the rest of that defense core, or at least most of them, aren't as versed in. He's more of a shot blocker and a shutdown guy. I think he'll certainly be on the radar, especially after he played very well against Team USA. To be there at the Olympics. Mackenzie Weegar, almost made this version of Team Canada twice, almost made the initial roster, was seriously considered as Alex Petrangelo's replacement when he pulled out due to injury or whatever health concern he was worried about. I think very much Thursday's championship game could impact whether Weegar's at the Olympics or not, because it might impact whether Canada just kind of sticks with a very similar defense. And then, I'll throw one more in there. And I do want to encourage people, if you haven't, to go read Danny's story about Dustin Wolf, chatting with goaltending coaches all the way back to when he was 8 or 9 years old. It's very well done. I wonder about him at the Olympics. I don't think, this is the way I put it when I wrote about it. He's probably a long shot, but how often have we said that about Dustin Wolf? And so if Team USA wants that sort of future star as their third goalie, and they might be inclined not to look at it that way because Ottinger and Jeremy Swayman are both so young anyways. But, if they look and say, well, hey, this might be our starter in 2030, why don't we take Dustin Wolf as our third goalie like that? You don't have to squint too hard to imagine that possibility. And it's another credit to what Dustin Wolf's done in this Calder caliber rookie season of his. He's very much put himself in the mix for an Olympic invite.
Well, as we've seen with this tournament, things change quick, and you never know who's going to show up for any given game. So lots of great candidates there. Make sure you check out both of those pieces by Wes and Danny. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. For Wes Gilbertson and Danny Austin, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.